the dog carried a baby out of a burning house and cried for help. What happened next is shocking. When a house accidentally caught fire, the family dog had to think fast to save the baby's life. What happened next is truly shocking. Dawn and Stuart were a couple much like any other. They had many of the same passions and interests which made them the perfect match. One of their shared passions was animals, and specifically dogs. That's why not long after they moved in together, they bought a dog. It was a large boxer that they called Beanie. It might have started off small, but it soon grew and became very well built and strong. Beanie might have looked tough and, like he'd win any fight he got into, but the truth was that he was the softest and most loving dog Stuart and Dawn could have ever hoped for. The dog became the first member in what was to become their new family, but he wasn't going to be the last. In the middle of March that year, Dawn discovered that she was pregnant. She and Stuart had not been planning on having a baby, but then welcomed the news with excitement. They couldn't wait to give Beanie a friend to grow up with. The pregnancy went smoothly, and in January of the next year she gave birth to a happy and healthy young boy that they called Mason. Both Stuart and Dawn turned out to be great, loving and wise parents who would do anything for their little boy. Throughout the year, Mason developed quickly and was soon sitting up and even crawling and trying to walk, and through it all Beanie was there as his best friend and sidekick. In fact, the two never parted. Their friendship was cute and adorable, but it was also the thing that saved the boy from certain death. Less than a year later, it was their very first Christmas with Mason, and Stuart and Dawn really wanted to make it special. They were going to spend the day together as a family, opening gifts, playing games, and eating food. Sure, Mason may still have been too young to truly appreciate it all, but it was still a special day and a magical moment that would live on in the memories of Stuart and Dawn for the rest of their lives. Heath and Beanie was getting in on the action, wearing a Santa outfit that Dawn had bought online. The amount of gifts that people had bought Mason was actually ridiculous, but no one could deny that it was a fantastic day. Beanie ran around playing with the wrapping paper, sending it flying in all directions as his family watched on and laughed. Eventually, they all got hungry and had a wonderful homemade turkey dinner topped off with champagne for Stuart and Dawn, fruit juice for Mason, and a nice cooling bowl of water for Beanie, who had long since shrugged off the Santa outfit. After eating, Stuart picked Mason up and placed him in his bed. It had been a long, busy, and exciting day for the little boy at just less than a year old. He would have no doubt been absolutely shattered, so it came as no surprise that Mason was fast asleep before Stuart even reached the bedroom door. His dad opened the window a little to let the stuffy air out and placed the baby inside his cart as he left the room. Beanie came strolling in and immediately leapt up onto the bedside table and into Mason's little bed. He curled up at his feet and fell to sleep too. Stuart smiled and walked away, leaving the door slightly ajar, just in case the dog wanted to leave. Stuart went downstairs and helped Dawn tidy up before telling his wife that he was going to go and drop off a few gifts at his brother's house on the other side of town. Dawn kissed him goodbye and told him not to be long. She then went to the couch and laid down in front of the TV. Before too long, her eyes started getting heavy and she too drifted off to sleep. She didn't know that disaster was about to strike. Something potentially horrific was about to happen while tidying the kitchen. Neither Dawn nor Stuart had noticed one of the hobs on the oven was still on. A stray cloth had fallen onto the hob and started smoldering before bursting into flames within moments. The fire had spread and much of the kitchen was in flames. It soon filled the room and reached the adjoining ones, burning all that was in its way. The fire really did spread quickly. There was plenty of wrapping paper and other flammable substances around the house, and it essentially burnt like a tinderbox. Quickly and intensely, smoke started to billow into the front room where Dawn was sleeping, and the thick black curtains soon awoke her immediately. She panicked and remembered that Mason was upstairs in his crib. She jumped up and ran towards the stairs, shielding her nose and mouth from the smoke as she ran, but the intense fire had taken over the bottom of the stairs, and passing through it would have been impossible. The fire roared and Dawn had no choice but to flee from the house, terrified about whether Mason was still alive or not. But what she didn't know was that as soon as Beanie the dog had smelled the smoke, he had leapt into action. Beanie had pushed the bedroom door closed to try to stop the smoke coming into the room, and then leapt up at the window, shoving his head into the small open gap using his head. He had pushed it wide open. It had taken a lot of strength, but eventually Beanie had the window open wide enough for him to get through. Luckily, there was a roof not far below the window, and beyond that soft bushes that he could jump into. Beanie had taken a big breath of cool night air and turned around, running back over to Mason's cart. He had leapt in and grabbed the baby by the scruff of his pajamas, lifting him up with all of his might and slowly carrying him across the room. In only a matter of moments, The raging flames outside the bedroom door would burn through and set all the plastic toys on fire. So Beanie had lifted the crying baby up and kept hold of him as he climbed out of the window and lowered himself down to the bushes below as softly as he could. Both Mason and Beanie got a few cuts and bruises, but their small injuries were preferable to remaining in the house and facing the fire from the front of the house. Beanie could hear Dawn's frantic screaming, but the protective dog continued, carrying Mason down the garden and away from the fire, but that's when he did something shocking and completely unexpected. Still carrying the crying baby in his jaws, Beanie walked out into the middle of the road with him and laid him down directly in the line of where cars would come hurtling by. Why had he done such a thing? Well, it was actually quite a clever move on the dog's part. You see, he knew that the fire engine would come from that direction, and when it came, it would see him and the baby in the road and stop and help them. It was a risky plan, but Beanie instinctively knew he had to protect and save Mason, and just as if it had been planned, the sound of a distant fire truck quickly came closer and closer until it came roaring into view. Beanie nervously paced around a crying Mason and hoped the fire truck would see them in the road. Thankfully, it did, and it screeched to a halt. 2 firefighters jumped out of the camp to assist the dog and the baby, while the rest of the crew ran to tackle the fire. By that point, the house was a blazing shell and nothing and no one would have survived it. Thankfully, though, save for minor injuries sustained during the escape, both Mason and Beanie were absolutely fine. The firefighter carried the young boy around the side of the flaming house to his hysterical mother. Dawn was beside herself in fear that her baby boy was trapped in the house. As was Stuart, who had sped back as soon as he heard what was going on, but the look of relief on their faces when they saw their son was heartwarming. The firefighter explained that Beanie had saved the boy all by himself, and they immediately rushed to Hagen. In gratitude, the family would never be able to repay the dog for saving Mason's life, but Beanie didn't mind. He was just happy that his family was happy, and that's what made him the goodest boy of all. So now it's over to you. What did you think of this incredible story? Have you ever heard of such a heroic dog before? As always, we love to hear from you, so be sure to leave your thoughts and opinions in the comments section down below.